Welcome to Making Moves, a podcast presented by the Center for Sport and Social Justice at Cal State University, East Bay. This episode focuses on sustainability in sport, featuring an interview with Michael Lee. This conversation is hosted by Ange Sounier. This is McKenna Duda, your podcast host. I'm a Cal State East Bay alum, former collegiate, now recreational runner, and I just recently earned my bachelor's degree in kinesiology. I operate within Orange County, California as a sports manager, plus I direct and write the scripts for this pod. So glad to be here again. Here, we'd like to serve our audience by educating and also inspiring y'all to feel empowered through sport and social justice. All athletes, sports fans, and social justice advocates are welcome. Now it is time for mindfulness. Within this portion of the pod, we intentionally consider a thought or topic. Let's link this to today's topic. An important way to encourage others to provide a safe, sustainable, and kind environment is to lead by example. An individual has the power to clean up after themselves. So does a team. A sports team can choose to toss out any trash that remains after a sporting event and to recycle the appropriate items. This is so simple, yet a very overlooked gesture within youth sports and beyond. This can start with you. Likewise, I encourage players to urge teammates to carpool. This saves gas and space. In regards to equipment, consider purchasing gently worn and used items. Please also be sure to get your use out of this equipment and to not fall for trends that urge customers to buy the newest and so-called best products. It is within your power to put sustainable practices into practice and to bring these conversations up within your circles so that others can reflect on their practices as well. Sustainability in sport involves three main components or pillars of sustainability. We should think about economic security, social justice, and environmental quality. The goal within sustainability is balance. Balancing these three pillars so as to achieve the most sustainable practices in our current and future sporting world. Sustainability relates to sport by the equipment and facilities used, the means of viewing the event, the resources involved for powering and creating an event at a particular location, and much more. Social justice will be critical to the viability of sports going forward. Climate change has already made profound impacts on both local and global sports, and we should consider innovative ways of tackling this issue.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's podcast. My name is Ange or Angelo Sounier, they, them pronouns. I'm a kinesiology major here at Cal State East Bay, and I'll be your host for this episode. I'm joined today by Michael Lee, who is a professor and chair of the Department of Anthropology, Geography, and Environmental Studies at Cal State East Bay. He has been at East Bay for 26 years and has taught a wide range of courses focused on sustainability of water systems, food systems, development, cities, and natural resources. He previously taught at the Pan American School of Agriculture in Honduras. Born in the UK, he is a longtime soccer player with the East Bay Afrikari FC and a lifelong supporter of Aston Villa and more recently the Oakland Roots. He is a member of the Alliance for the Black Community at Cal State East Bay and is interested in how sports, social justice, and sustainability intersect. It's a great bio. Welcome, Michael. We're really excited to have you. So let's see, to get started, can you tell us where you're joining from today? And just for fun, tell us your beverage of choice.
Well, Ange, I'm talking from my office on the Haywood campus. My beverage of choice would be whatever cocktail my friend Dave Hoshin chooses to make for our regular Friday night COVID bubble dinners.
Lovely. That sounds nice. Cocktails with a friend, especially during COVID, is important to have that time. All right, let's jump in. Can you define sustainability and why this is an important concept?
Sure. So I'd like to paraphrase the definition that Cal State East Bay's Matt Atencio, which I think everybody listening to this podcast knows, uses in his recent book. And he writes that sustainability focuses on practices to improve key elements of human life, focusing on the intersectionality of economic security, social inclusion and justice, and kind of environmental ecological quality. And the purpose is to guarantee the welfare of both the present and future generations. So it's an important concept because, over the last 200 years or so, we've accelerated the pace at which we've undermined the environmental systems that support the technology-rich, kind of high-consumption, disposable lifestyles of us as people. And in doing so, we've got billions of people on the planet using an enormous amount of resources to support our daily lives, but we're using up those non-renewable resources and undermining the future productivity of the renewable ones, in part because we don't use things like the sunlight that drives our energy and food and systems in a way that's kind of efficient and logical.
Great. Thank you for that definition. I think there's a lot more involved than I realize. I'm kind of a novice on this subject, so I'm going to be really interested to what you have to say about it all.
Great.
So, yeah, you gave us a great definition. Now, can you tell us, what does sustainability involve?
So when we think about sustainability, we often think about three kind of components or pillars that support the idea. One is economic security. Another is social justice, and the other is environmental quality. So if you think about when you're playing tennis, right, it's hitting the sweet spot. It's with that sports analogy, it's finding a way that we don't sacrifice or minimize one of those by pushing too hard on another. As a society, we're focused very much on the economy. And often that's to the detriment of the other two pillars. We've got a globalized economy, massive corporations with huge budgets that, that focus on profit. And that's great. Modern capitalism has been an economic model that's served us well, driven us forward in technology, etc., benefited us a great deal, but really mostly the 20% of the world's population living in those industrialized nations. And it's left a lot of people behind. So if you want, I can expand on that a little bit. I like to kind of, pause and let us kind of interact a little way. If not, I'll keep on talking for a long time. So,
I think, I'd love to hear you expand on that. And the thing that really catches my attention is just how I like that you're breaking it into the three pillars, the economic, social justice, and the environmental quality. So I'm really curious what you have to say more about that, and especially the way that the economic has been, just so overly focused on, and how can we kind of find that balance? Yeah. So,
and that's really important that you focus on that, Ange, because, we've benefited a lot of people, but we've left a lot of people behind, right? We've created, and this is why sport and social justice kind of focus on, we've left people behind. We've created incredible inequities, both within the rich nations, but also between the rich and the poor nations at the global scale. In the US, we know we've got 1 in 7 households that have incomes below, the official poverty line. And globally, what always staggers me is that 1 in 10 people around the world live in extreme poverty with incomes of less than $2 a day. And our economic systems really don't pay a living wage to a large proportion of workers. And this is in part what Matt refers to when he kind of references social inclusion and justice. Also added to that, in many nations, not least in the US, this economic inequality is skewed towards, minority and immigrant populations, which for many social and historical reasons, including institutional racism, right, have not benefited proportionally from the economic gains. that goes right back to colonialism and slavery. I mean, there's been a long history of inequality that sustainability can help address.
Right. I think that's really interesting. I think something I wanted to say that I have kind of like my kind of main idea of sustainability is, people who want to do better for the earth. But I think what I sometimes notice that there's like a gap between people wanting to better the environment, but kind of missing the point that so many humans are really not, like you said, living on a very minimal wage and in not livable conditions. And I think, again, I just like the inclusion of these three pillars where it's not just focusing on just the earth, but also the people that inhabit the earth.
Yeah. So, we often talk about economic capital, right? The wealth that we have, but we don't sufficiently value human capital or environmental capital. So we don't protect our people and we don't protect our environment from degradation and kind of over exploitation. And in the field of environmental economics, we refer to kind of the way that our industrial system has used up resources like oil and created problems like global warming or depleted the world's fisheries or eroded the world's soils. We call these things externalities, right? They're external to the kind of the economic process. Same as when we put, chemicals that are toxic into air and water, or the microplastics that are found everywhere today. I mean, the negative effects of these things we call externalities because they're passed on to somebody else. They're not included in the price that we pay for things, right? They're not you and me and the companies that serve us.
Yes, definitely interesting that you expanded further on that. Thank you. Let's see.
Yeah, so one point I'd like to add to that, if you don't mind.
No, please.
This is something that I talk a lot about in my classes at East Bay, is that, this idea of externalities. Whenever we fail to create and build and pay for systems that could avoid negative impacts and instead allow them to occur, right? We're passing costs on to a distant community, to broader society, but to the future generations too, right? To my kids, your grandkids. And by not building those systems, by not paying those costs, our industries and corporations provide us with goods and services at a much lower price than otherwise would be the case. And they make higher profits, right? Which, is important. No profit, no business. It's part of sustainable business means a business that can make a profit. But these basic laws of supply and demand mean that when things are lower price than they should be, we use more of something than is good for us. When it comes to energy, we can afford to be inefficient. When it comes to food, we can be wasteful. When it comes to plastic, we can be disposable. When it comes to buildings, we can build them bigger than they need to be, right? And this process has played out now for centuries. And that's really what sustainability is about. It's about creating balance again that shows us the true value of things, which often isn't very well reflected by the price we pay.
Very interesting. A question I have on that, as far as creating, a more sustainable society, who would you say that the main responsibility falls on? Obviously individual too, but then there's so much, multi-layers of government and different things. Where would you say the biggest change needs to occur?
Yeah, you put your finger on it. There's a lot of levels. There are a lot of ways we have to align it all. We all have to pull in the same direction. So, governments, corporations, educators, private individuals. I mean, this is something that requires us all to be, aligned, pulling in the same direction. And, we can certainly talk about that today. And I think what's happened is that, we don't have that alignment. We don't have that balance. To me, it's very obvious that our systems are really not not planned very well to work to achieve those three pillars we've talked about. Healthy people, healthy planet, healthy economy.
Right. And like you said, I think an important piece of it too is that it seems like the negative effects of, having such a successful quote unquote economy is that large populations, and particularly minority populations and people of color, are the ones that are most dramatically affected, negatively, while everyone else is benefiting. So I think that's...
Yeah, unfortunately, often that is the case. And that's where the whole piece about social justice comes in, So thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, I really like, again, the way you break it down. It's actually really just helpful, making sense for me. All right, so we kind of talked about it generally. Now I want to know, how does sustainability relate to sports?
So that's the big question for today, right? I think sustainability is related to sports in so many different ways, right? From who gets to play sports and how, the equipment we use when we're playing sports, the facilities on which we play those sports, the way the sports are watched by fans, the energy used to power sports facilities, how we travel to play and watch those sports. There's so many touch points. But that's true for, most things, right? In sports is no different from anything else. It's fundamental. Sports and the economy, sports and the environment, sports and people. It's multifaceted. So one way to think about that, right, is that we kind of put it into a framework. So, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking of kind of two things. One is, and I don't know how many of our listeners will be aware, but, the United Nations has a thing called the Sustainable Development Goals that are a whole series of things that we want to achieve by 2030 that will kind of try and put the Earth more into alignment, into that balance of all the different things. And so back in 2017, UNESCO, which is the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, tried to align sports to those Sustainable Development Goals. And they found 9 really important areas where sport and sustainability intersect. One would be the goal number 3 about health and well-being. Improving the health and well-being of people of all ages is something that sport is fundamental for, right? Quality education, providing education and lifelong learning, acquisition of skills. Sports is really important in that area. In fact, you only have to look at football or at soccer around the world, and you see how that can be a change for many athletes from around the world that can use their skills to benefit themselves economically, and then through that go back and benefit, their villages, their towns. Some of those stories are amazing. There's goal number 5 about gender equality, promoting equality between men and empowering women and girls. Decent work and economic growth. That's number 8. Reduction of inequalities, number 10. Sustainable cities and communities, number 11. Responsible consumption and production, number 12. And then climate action, combating climate change, number 13. Sport can touch and contribute to all of those areas, which is why, sports and sustainability is a really good topic to discuss. Oh, and the last one that I forgot was number 16, which is about peace and justice and strong institutions. Sport brings people together. Sport is a way that we kind of create commonality and harmony. So sports in all sorts of ways is really aligned with the goals, or could contribute to the goals of sustainable development.
That is very cool. I really honestly had no idea how sport and sustainability would relate. And now you just listed off, 16 or, several amazing goals that make a lot of sense now that you connect them to sport. I think, and I'm a believer that sport really touches all aspects of life. It's kind of like a microcosm of life in a way, in many ways. So that's very cool. I think the one that stood out to me really quick was just where you said, I think it was a third one where people can come into sport and gain more resources and bring those back to their community and empower people.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Totally, because sport is an engine for economic growth in many communities, right? Sports it's a place where people can find employment, but it also brings employment through its activities there. So it's a driver of economic growth. If you don't mind, one thing that I'm an academic, so I have my academic kind of view of things, and so one thing that we do in environmental studies that I've personally been working in is this idea that we can also take a kind of a holistic kind of life cycle approach to when we look at sports or something like a professional sports club, right? Any activity we have, be it sports or be it, commerce, entertainment, whatever, we use energy, we use resources to execute that activity and produce something, a product. For example, a home game by a soccer club. So we can look at what goes in to producing that output, be it a sports event, and kind of quantify all the inputs and the operations as to what resources are used, what environmental impacts occur, and kind of capture those with numbers. And we call that a life cycle assessment. We can also do what's called a social life cycle assessment, which looks at what are the kind of social impacts, good and bad, from the way we do our business. And we can do an economic assessment. Is there a return on the investment? And so one of the things that the industry is trying to do within sustainability is apply this notion of life cycle to something like sports. For example, a professional sports club could look at what impacts its operations have compared to either other clubs in the same field or compared to some kind of goal that they have, like the goal to have zero greenhouse gas emissions or 100% renewable energy use. This approach can kind of do that. A social life cycle assessment would look at how a club performs with respect to things that capture social concerns like worker conditions or impacts on local communities or social issues or fan and consumer welfare. Do they pay living wages? Is there labor equality? Are employees discriminated against? Was slave labor used in supplying, the balls that they play with? Do they invest in the community? Do they cause local employment? Do they support women, local, minority-owned businesses? I mean, these things can be quantified and can be presented in a way that you can compare. How good am I compared to somebody else or compared to where I want to be, So it's exciting to apply these kinds of methodologies to sports, just like in anything else.
Very cool. I also am a data geek, so I like hearing the numbers on things. I think, making that connection is really interesting, especially when you think about the broad range that you just expanded on, like even just down to the ball that is used, how so many different inputs go into every aspect. And you're making me wonder, I guess it sounds like this is already being done. Are you speaking, the life cycle assessment? Is this something that sports are doing yet or not?
Yeah, they're starting to. I mean, it's not an area that I specialize in, but for some of my classes in the past, I've had students that have been interested in sports and sustainability. And, they've gone out into the literature and they've found, studies on either, tournaments or clubs or different activities where, yes, they are applying both environmental and social life cycle assessment techniques to really try and understand, how far along the spectrum from business as usual to better to best something is. So this is totally being studied right now. It's very data intensive. It requires some effort to do, but absolutely, and that this work is being done today. Yeah.
Very cool. And I know the Winter Olympics are happening right now, so I'm sure that there's a lot of discussion that goes on, putting on such a big event like that, and the sustainability piece is probably discussed. Do you have any details on like the discussion around the Winter Olympics or just the recent Olympics? How much sustainability has been talked about?
Not in great detail. I'm aware of claims, efforts that are being made to address the impact of large events, particularly the very high profile ones like the Olympics. I mean, if we think about how much resources go into something like the Winter Olympics, I mean, as I understand it, almost all of the snow is being made by machines, right? That's very energy intensive. There's two ways to do that. I mean, are we going to power those machines with electricity made by coal-fired power plants, or are we going to invest in renewable energy technologies that can mean that, we're making snow, but we're making snow with the best available, least impactful technologies, and we have to kind of decide, is that the right thing to do? There's a lot, obviously there's some complicated decisions going into making that kind of thing. Like, having the World Cup in a really, really kind of hot desert climate where, for fan safety and comfort, you've got to air condition all these stadiums. What does that mean for relative impacts compared to having the World Cup somewhere else? So these issues are totally being discussed by the Olympic Committee, by FIFA, by others, because quite frankly, they have an obligation to, I think.
I agree. I think it is their obligation, and hopefully the systems keep getting better as we do move towards a more, renewable energy that, like you said, it's not going to be a perfect world, and maybe we will still be making man-made snow, but like you said, it could be coming from a renewable resource rather than
using recycled water, for example, that kind of thing.
That's cool. I like that a lot. The cost benefit, that maybe it's still a little bit of a cost, but there's it's not as much. Great. So let's jump into our next question, which we're going to talk a little bit more about the Olympics and just different levels of sport. What would you say that pushing for sustainability differs according to the level that the sport is played, whether it's at the Olympics or within community sport, professional sports, college athletics? How does that differ?
That's a great question, Ange. I feel from understanding the topic quite well that sustainability can be applied, at various levels and various scales, and we can push for better practices at all of them. It's not, one more than the other. Clearly, the scale of the impact is going to vary, but I think at all levels, it's about moving the needle away from, current wasteful, kind of damaging or inequitable practices to new standards that have fewer and fewer negative impacts and more positive impacts. I mean, that's our goal all across the board, right? So, for example, in our local parks, sports fields could be planted with, more drought-tolerant grass species, and they can have the most efficient irrigation systems, and they can use recycled wastewater instead of, municipal drinking water. They can be fertilized with natural, organic, and not synthetic fertilizers. They can not use toxic herbicides. Park workers can be paid a living wage. The costs for that can be passed on to actual users through fees, but those fees can be subsidized for people with low income so that everybody has access. I mean, this is the kind of systems thinking that we could apply at really any level, if we're talking about a professional club, they can build stadiums out of renewable or recycled materials in locations that redevelop neighborhoods in economic decline. They can hire and train and employ people from the local community, especially low income or underrepresented minorities, and offer a living wage. They can support local businesses. They can source products sustainably, such as uniforms or balls that we've talked about. They can install solar panels on stadium roofs or parking lots or training facilities. They can build stadiums at transit routes to allow fans to take public transit to games. so many aspects of the business model could be touched with the brush of sustainability to make it over time switch from being, harmful to helpful, to being, negatively impactful to actually being positive. So I'm really optimistic. I think there's a lot we could do.
That's awesome. Even like you said, on the kind of most local level, even the parks, you could, make that process so much better for the environment, for the, the people there, that social justice aspect. I guess my question, kind of relating to like the third pillar on the economic side, is because it sounds so good when you say it. It's like, yeah, let's give people more jobs. Let's do something better for the earth, and let's improve communities that need it. But then the question is like, why aren't we doing it? And I'm wondering, is it because, obviously I think there's a lot of corporate greed and just a lot of greed in general, but is the like the front load cost so high that people are afraid of making that investment? And that's kind of, what would you say is the issue?
Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of, there's a lot of obstacles. Part of it is, we already have a system that's built. And so retooling a system is often very expensive. And so, people worry about, well, what does that mean? Like for raising costs, that it's something that we can't afford to do. In some cases, when we're talking about environmental or social benefits, they might take time, to kind of realize. And so we take a short-term perspective. We think about immediate returns to investment, 4 or 5 years, as opposed to things that really, may take 10 or 15 or 20 years to play out. Obviously, sustainability requires investment, but it's not always a negative. Often that leads to long-term savings. But the problem is, in many cases, it is the upfront cost, right? It's having systems in place where an investor or a bank or whatever will come up with the upfront money to be paid for by long-term benefits. And in some cases, from a society's point of view, the benefits we get aren't to the people who spend the money. They're to everybody. They're to the broader society. And often they're in the form of things we're going to avoid. So it's things we don't, it's things that aren't going to happen as opposed to things that are going to happen. And convincing people about that sometimes can be hard, right? Because it's not the same, you won't have to spend this is different from you'll get this income. We know what that's like for ourselves. It's hard to make those kinds of choices. But also, part of it, Angie, is we got to get real. If we're serious about sustainability, we have to understand that some of the things we've done in the past that were cheap will become more expensive, because in the past we've cut those corners and we've passed the costs on to others, environmentally or socially, and we could have avoided that, but we didn't. If we're serious about social justice and the environment, we have to realize that, some of the things that we've enjoyed doing cheaply will cost us more. But we'll get quality over quantity maybe, and we have to kind of learn to adjust our expectations.
Definitely. I hope that we are making that turn to quality, over quantity. And like you said, it's going to be a long-term investment, and it takes time. It's not kind of the immediate payout. But yeah, I'm trying to stay hopeful on that.
No, I'm an optimist, Ange. I'm an optimist.
I appreciate that. And yeah, it's cool to hear you, who've done a lot of, research in the field, that you are an optimist and have a positive outlook on it. Can you tell us a little bit, just briefly, why you're an optimist? Like, what makes you feel so hopeful?
Yeah, well, it's because a lot of the things that we want to do is we already have the technologies, we already have examples, we have the techniques, right? So I'm optimistic because I know that we don't have to wait for like a new invention or something else to come along. We've got all of the tools that we need. What we need is some, political will, some decisions to actually do it. And there are signs, obviously, that there are folks willing to do that, who are able to do that. And, we're waking up. We've got some pressure. We've got some in California, we've made some really good decisions about things like, signing on to the Paris Agreement for climate change, our goals for energy neutrality, energy self-dependence, renewables. There's a lot of really good road signs ahead. My only worry is that, we'll spin our wheels a bit too long and we'll miss some opportunities. But I got to hope for my kids and my grandkids that, we'll come to our senses and we'll do this stuff. And I do believe that we will. And I believe that Cal State East Bay and the graduates we produce will be part of that future and will be helping to make those decisions. So that's another reason why I'm optimistic. I just think our students are going to do great things.
That's very sweet. Yeah, that's good to hear all of that. Hopeful is good. All right, I guess let's come back to sport a little bit now again. And I'm wondering if you have anyone in mind. We've talked about, the different ways that you can make sport more sustainable. Does anyone come to your mind as far as a professional sports team that has taken those steps?
Yeah, I think, there's certainly a growing interest in sustainability in sport. We have to be careful that it's not just kind of what people refer to as greenwashing, where people pay lip service to the idea rather than do some fundamental, profound changes. Like I mentioned, the World Cup out in Qatar. I find it very hard to believe that the FIFA or whatever, that they're claiming that this is going to be what they're calling a carbon neutral tournament. Not in my understanding of that term as an environmental scientist, but there are examples of folks around the world that are trying to actually at a more kind of local level achieve that. And the one that always comes up when we talk about sport, particularly if you're an Englishman originally like me, is a team called Forest Green Rovers in the Division 2 of the English Football League, or Soccer League. It's located in a small town called Stroud, and it was recognized by FIFA a couple of years ago as being the greenest soccer club in the world. In part because its major shareholder was a founder of a renewable energy company who kind of rescued the club from near bankruptcy about a decade ago, I think now, and has embarked on a personal journey to make it the world's most sustainable professional sports team. So I've been reading about this club for quite a while now in my morning newspaper in The Guardian, and among various aspects, when I look into the club, they report that they're 100% powered by renewable energy, that their playing field, the football pitch is, organic, no pesticide use. They use rainwater that they harvest for supplemental irrigation. The food served in the stadium is vegan. The kit's made from recycled coffee grounds, and waste plastic. And they've even recently secured planning permission from the council, the local council that governs building, to build a brand new stadium for their fans and their team that will be made entirely from sustainably grown wood in an eco park that will not only be a community resource, it will also be like a nature preserve and enhance local environmental quality. There's a lot that they do that's clearly close to best practice, and they appear to be on their way to doing something that might, if we look closely enough and took a life cycle analysis, might be described as being truly sustainable. So, they're held up by many as an example, and I know that there are Premier League clubs that are talking to them. There are folks across Europe that are interested in what they're doing. I think they're, I believe our own Auckland Roots is looking at them to see what they can learn and try and apply it here in the East Bay in my hometown of Oakland.
Wow, that's great. What a cool example. Yeah, the Forest Green Rovers of the English Football League. Amazing that that's out there and working. You mentioned the Oakland Roots organization just now. Can you briefly share a little bit more about what the Oakland Roots organization is and does, and what you know about their commitment to becoming climate positive by 2022?
Yeah, so Oakland Roots is, if people don't know it, is our local Bay Area professional soccer team in the second division of the U.S. football system, and I've been to quite a few of the home games there down at Laney College. I even went up to Sacramento to watch one of the games. And so Oakland Roots is my second team. Aston Villa's always been my first team, but Oakland Roots, they're my local guys. From what I can tell, I mean, I'm not personally involved in that plan, although I think there's some potential to work with the Roots in the future. But from what I can tell from the Roots Initiative, they have made a start on the path towards sustainability within the sport of soccer. And that's really important because they've got a really broad local fan base that now got nationwide media exposure. And so I think that, what they're doing is great, particularly this effort they're on now to become what's really carbon neutral or carbon positive, which means if we look at all their activities, everything that goes into running the club and putting on a season of soccer in the second division of US football, that when they do all of the numbers, analyze all of the data, because of what they do directly or indirectly, more atoms of carbon will be taken out of the atmosphere than is put into the atmosphere. That's ultimately what being carbon positive is all about. So as I understand it, the Roots have begun to do an audit of all of their direct and indirect carbon dioxide equivalent emissions. And they are going to try and, over time, increasingly cause those emissions to be avoided by changing the way they do things, like how they source their electricity, or by offsetting sources that in the short and medium term are kind of unavoidable. Like, if they're going to play against the Carolina Railhawks, they've got to get on an airplane, and fly to North Carolina. So they'd have to offset that carbon by doing something else, What's really important, and I think that they're totally aware of this, is that, when they try and avoid those carbon emissions, they'll invest in actions that are measurable, that are tangible, things that otherwise wouldn't have expected to have happen if they hadn't done what they do, right? So true carbon neutrality is when we cause more carbon to be taken in that is emitted. And to do that, if part of that program is to educate youth to live a different life than they otherwise would do, it's got to be clear that that activity means that in the life of that kid that's been educated by Oakland Roots, they're going to use less carbon. If they plant trees, it has to be in areas where trees wouldn't otherwise have been planted. It's really important for transparency and for integrity that they work with folks that will enable them to really, truly do things that otherwise wouldn't have been done, because if it would be done anyway, you can't claim it as being something that comes from you. So, one of the main challenges that the Roots and anybody will face is, the fact that a lot of what they do is working with third parties, so those third parties are going to have to align with the Roots' goals, like Laney College, where the Roots play. I mean, Laney College, would have to be a partner in that, and they could help them in becoming, 100% consumers of renewable electricity. If they have to pay more, well, the Roots can help them pay more by paying Laney College to use their facility, their vendors and subcontractors. They'd have to make sure that what they're buying also is the best of the best, so they can claim secondhand the environmental benefits that come from working with partner A, who's good, versus partner B, who's business as usual. So, there's a lot that's going on. And so this goal of carbon positivity is fantastic. And it's a sign of real leadership. And like Idris Ogandawal and Mike Geddes, who the two of the management team that I know personally, right, deserve a lot of great credit. It's clearly of vital importance that they do this for society, that we claw back that carbon out of the atmosphere. And as they grow and mature as a sports organization and hopefully go on to great success, because I'm a fan, right, that they can influence others to do the same, I know they're already working really well in the area of community engagement and enrichment. I mean, they're very much a social justice oriented organization. I have one example. They offer support to a community partner, My Youth Soccer in Oakland. A friend of mine, Steve Sparks, who's an Afrikari teammate, set up My Youth to offer free soccer camps every year to kids from, as many as 24 zip codes. Well, the Roots helps support him and Joanna DeLuz, who's his co-founder, in doing their work. And, it's fabulous. And I know they've got lots and lots of examples like that. So it's not just, climate neutrality they're doing. They're really trying to make a difference within the community. And I hope that, our faculty like Matt, Atencio, and you, kinesiology students, can also help them with this, right? I'm a Roots fan, and I'm hoping that my AGES program and students from my program can also help contribute going forward. I mean, I don't know what that looks like yet, but I think there's a lot of potential for partnership in this area between the Roots and kinesiology, the Center for Sports and Social Justice, the AGES program. I mean, we've all got to pull together in the same direction.
Yeah, no doubt. I think I'm pretty impressed with the goal and the steps that the Oakland Roots have taken. I think that's really cool and definitely inspiring to hear. And again, just that they're doing not only the taking care of the environment piece, but then also that social justice piece. I'm like, wow, that's very cool. Let's see. Do you think that it's possible to make sport, like as a whole, entirely sustainable? And what would that look like? What would obstacles be?
Well, if the listeners could see me, that I'd be blowing out my cheeks right now. That's a big question. Entirely sustainable. I think yes, there are many opportunities to untie like the knots we've made for ourselves across society when it comes to harmful or wasteful practices. Some of those knots are more difficult to untie than others. Like it's like a ball of string that got all out of whack. In some cases, it's going to involve replacing existing systems with better ones. In other cases, we're just going to have to compensate for systems that we have because it won't make sense, like to demolish a sports stadium and build a new one. Well, then maybe not. And then we have to keep it and we have to mitigate those inefficiencies, in energy and water use, etc., by investing in energy generation somewhere else, or treating wastewater somewhere else to replace it. So, not all of the responsibility for sustainability falls on sports' shoulders. But yes, sports can shift. Can we make it entirely sustainable? Well, my classic answer for that as an academic is it depends, right? There's a lot of things that have to happen for that to occur. I'm an optimist, as I said. I believe that eventually we can retool our society so that sport and, the broader system in which sport takes place, like cities, etc., much of which is built and managed by other sectors, can become carbon neutral, can be powered by renewable energy, can pay a living wage to everybody, can treat people respectfully and equitably. But it's not sport alone to do that. Sport is taking place within a much broader system. But those of us who play sport, those of us who watch sport organizations themselves, we can be players, right? We can be players. So, that's one of the ways in which Oakland Roots can be really powerful. They're a player. They're a major player, They've got the attention of the Oakland City Council. They've got the attention of thousands of Oakland, San Leandro, Richmond residents who go to watch. Sports super influential in shaping public opinion as an engine of economic growth, as a mobilizer and motivator of people. I think we know that, right, about our sports, Ange? They get us to do things that we didn't know we could do.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that is, like you said, it doesn't fall solely on the shoulders of sports to make the world sustainable. But like you said, they are very influential, and players themselves, become like, people have an emotional attachment to players often. And there's so much just like social, influence and power there that I think is really beautiful, kind of more on like a person to person level than like a powered down kind of order from the government or something. It becomes more something that people want to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's like those soccer players or professional sports players that all signed on to that 1%. The Manchester United player, what's his name? The Spanish kid. I forget. He has all of his players sign on and they devote 1%. I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot, but 1% from someone who's being paid 10 million a year. That's not bad. That money goes into social programs. So Juan Mata, that was
okay.
His name, right?
Yeah, that's not bad. 1% is a good.
Sports can be part of the problem, part of business as usual, or it can be part of the solution, helping us transition to a better system of living. I want it to be part of the solution. I want to be part of the solution. I know that you, Ange, want to be part of the solution.
Yes, definitely. And speaking of solutions, to wrap up our final question, we want to know for listeners out there, what are some sustainable practices that students and athletes at CSUEB can do on a daily basis?
Good question. Bring it back home.
Back home. Yep.
Yeah, so one of the first things that they can do, our student athletes and our students at CSU East Bay can do, right, is to become educated on the concept of sustainability and the many ways that they can be applied, in the case of kinesiology, to sports, and to prepare themselves to become change agents within sports and through their careers post-grad. I mean, for example, kinesiology could introduce more content on sustainability into its curriculum, or encourage majors like yourself to seek out sustainability-focused courses as they take their GE, their general education requirements, through departments like my own. For example, at Aegis, we created a sustainability certificate that any CSU student can pursue, which is added to your major degree. And through the focus, though the focus of the class is right in that, like sustainable food systems, or environment, sustainability, social justice. Those are two of the classes we teach. The focus of those classes is not on sport. But students interested in sports-related aspects of the topic can ask to do a research assignment on sports-related sustainability. The instructor can help them with their research and critical thinking, even though the instructor may not be an expert on sport itself, right? So, as my dad used to say, doesn't hurt to ask. You have to drive your own education. If you're a sports major, kinesiology major, and you're taking a class on sustainability, ask the instructor, hey, I want to do a paper on sports, be it on winter sports and the threat of climate change to winter sports and how we can climate proof winter sports in a way that is not going to, hurt other areas of our goals like energy and make it part of the solution and make it sustainable. I had a student write a paper on that in a class I taught about what's going to happen to the ski industry in the Sierra Nevada if the projections of climate change are accurate, and what they can do to preserve that industry, because the kid was a snowboard freak. So, that was personal to him. And I said, go for it. You'll teach me as you teach yourself, right? I'll help you shape your research. So stuff like that, we can all do that. Maybe in the future, your program, kinesiology, and my good friend Paul Carpenter, your chair, right, can hire a faculty that's a specialist in sports sustainability. And then they can teach a class on this. Maybe a team teach a class with someone from my program. We can have a cross-listed course, sustainability in sports. Maybe that's what we should do in the future. A second thing really is also to be mindful of what sports is and what it does and how it ends up with outcomes that are wasteful or harmful, or efficient and beneficial, and play a role in trying to eliminate the former and encourage the latter. So let's say, you're coaching a kid's soccer team, right? Something simple like no single-use disposables to be brought for drinks or snacks, right? A policy for the team, and that you organize a carpool roster to practice and to games that you keep track of, so you can minimize the number of miles driven in a season to the number of players being transported. Make it local, make it personal, and then use that as a teaching moment for the athletes that may not have thought about things that way. That's one beautiful thing that people can do. And then, when you get to a position of power where you make decisions, like if you're working in a park district, make decisions that promote sustainability, that promote access, that reduce costs for those who can least afford it, that minimize environmental impacts and water use and things like that, or become the CEO of a major franchise like the Oakland Roots, right? And get to be able to make your club climate positive. That's why folks like Idris, can have a role that I think when he started out, he never would have thought that he could do, which is to become, a leader in sustainability, as well as living the dream of being the CEO or what I think is the chief marketing officer of a nationally high profile sports club. What a wonderful position to be in. But you don't have to be the CEO of a sports club to make a difference. You can be the coach of a little league baseball team, or of a Pop Warner football team, or of a East Bay under-8s soccer team. We can all make a difference, and that's why I'm an optimist, man. I told you.
That's great. Yeah, again, the optimism coming through strong. It's great to hear. I love what you said about just, the overlap between departments and how that could be even more encouraged. And I would love personally to, take more classes that did focus on sustainability within kinesiology, because this podcast and just getting to do this discussion with you has really opened my eyes to that. And hopefully for people listening too, and like you said, more teaching moments, that we can all do in whatever way that we work in the world. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Well, no, Ange, thank you for the chance. You've been a wonderful host. You asked some great questions, and I hope the audience, finds them interesting. And hey, any kinesiology student that wants to take sustainability classes, they should drop me an email, and I'll see what I can do to point them in the right direction.
Definitely. All right. Well, Michael, we appreciate you sharing your time, your knowledge, and just really for going deep with us. Thank you for that. I really learned a lot, and I'm going to think about how I can bring sustainability into my kinesiology career. So thank you.
Well, Ange, wish me luck. Not this weekend, Sunday, but next Sunday. My over 50 Africara team are in the Grey Cup final for the third year running. We've won it the last 2 years. We're hoping we're going to win it this year. And everybody get out there and play some sports. It's good for the mind. It's good for the body, and it contributes towards sustainability. So thanks for doing this. Bye.
This podcast was brought to you by the Center for Sport and Social Justice at Cal State University East Bay. It was produced by McKenna Duda, Kim Muzi, Nikhil Kernar, and Kushal Sheshadri. The music is by Marby Miller. A big thank you to the Center for Sport and Social Justice co-directors Dr. Matthew Atencio and Dr. Missy Wright for their support. Funding for Making Moves was provided by Cal State University East Bay and the Center for Sport and Social Justice. Make sure to catch all 6 episodes of Making Moves, streaming now on SoundCloud, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.